the most dangerous wars do not begin with invasions. They begin with geography. In the Western Pacific, that geography is brutally tight. Just 110 kilometers of open water separate Taiwan's coastline from Japan's last island outpost. It is a gap roughly equivalent to the drive from Manhattan to Philadelphia, and across that narrow stretch, China is already pushing missiles, aircraft, and drones to the edge of confrontation. Japan has decided that this sliver of ocean will not remain undefended. Beginning in the year 2026, Tokyo is transforming the tiny island of Yonaguni into a forward military position. Medium-range surface-to-air missiles are being deployed. Long-range radar systems are coming online. Electronic warfare units are being positioned to monitor and disrupt activity across the strait. At the same time, Japan is reinforcing a wider chain of southwestern islands, creating a 200-kilometer arc of missile-armed territory facing Taiwan. This is no longer about a remote community of 1,700 residents. It is about whether Japan can deny China freedom of movement in the opening hours of a crisis. Whether a chain of island-based launchers can challenge Chinese aircraft and warships before allies even have time to react. The question now shaping the region is unavoidable. Can this emerging missile archipelago prevent China from isolating Taiwan at the very start of a conflict? Or does deterrence collapse the moment the first shot is fired? China is already testing the limits. The People's Liberation Army has turned the waters around Taiwan into a proving ground for power projection. In June 2025, the aircraft carrier Liaoning conducted 260 fighter and helicopter takeoffs and landings near Japan's Miyakojima Island. At the same time, the carrier Shandong operated farther east in the Philippine Sea. Together, China's two operational carriers launched more than 1,100 sorties in a single month. The message was clear. Beijing can sustain high-tempo air operations far from its mainland bases, and it can do so on multiple axes at once. The pressure does not stop there. Chinese drones now regularly probe the narrow airspace corridor between Yonaguni and Taiwan. Each flight forces Japan to respond, scrambling fighters from Naha Air Base more than 500 kilometers away. Every interception stretches response times, fuel limits, and personnel endurance. This is the environment Japan is preparing for. A conflict where distance is measured in minutes, not days. Where geography decides who moves first. And where a small island, once barely noticed on a map, could determine whether the Western Pacific slides into open war. On November 24, 2025, a suspected Chinese high-altitude surveillance drone flew directly through that gap, triggering an immediate Japan Air Self-Defense Force response. The pattern is clear. China is rehearsing blockade operations, testing Japanese reaction times, and normalizing military presence in waters Tokyo considers strategically vital. For Japan, the nightmare scenario isn't a full-scale invasion. It's a missile and naval blockade that severs Taiwan from outside support, while simultaneously threatening Japanese territory and shipping lanes that carry 90% of the nation's energy imports. Current defenses, Patriot batteries on Okinawa's main island, and Aegis destroyers patrolling offshore can't adequately cover the 1,200-kilometer island chain stretching southwest from Kyushu to Taiwan. The gap between islands ranges from 110 to 300 kilometers, creating blind spots where Chinese aircraft and ships can operate with reduced risk. Can Japan close those gaps with a network of land-based missiles and sensors deployed close enough to Taiwan to matter, but without triggering a preemptive Chinese strike or pulling Tokyo into a conflict it isn't prepared to fight? Japan's answer is the Southwest Shift, the largest military buildup in 4 decades, focused on fortifying the Ryukyu Islands, Yonaguni, Ishigaki, Miyakojima, Amami Oshima, and Okinawa itself. Each island is being equipped with missile regiments, radar arrays, and electronic warfare units designed to create overlapping fields of fire across the East China Sea approaches to Taiwan. The United States backs this strategy, deploying marine littoral regiments and advanced radar systems to Yonaguni as part of a larger effort to create an island-hopping rapid response force. Taiwan, though not formally aligned with Japan, benefits directly. Any Chinese attempt to blockade Taiwan would have to operate under the shadow of Japanese missiles, positioned 110 to 200 kilometers away. But here is where it gets dangerous. China views these deployments as Japanese interference in what Beijing considers a domestic matter of reunification with Taiwan. Every new missile battery Japan installs is seen in Beijing as complicity in American containment strategy, raising the risk that Yonaguni becomes a first-strike target in any Taiwan contingency. Yonaguni Island is Japan's last piece of sovereign territory before Taiwan, a speck of volcanic rock 24 kilometers long, home to wild horses, scuba divers, and now one of the most strategically significant military outposts in the Indo-Pacific. Japan established a ground self-defense force base there in 2016 with roughly 160 personnel focused on coastal surveillance. By 2022, radar units had been added. In March 2025, an additional 50-person electronic warfare unit arrived, bringing the total military strength to around 230. Now, in 2026, Japan is deploying the Type 3 Chu-SAM, a medium-range surface-to-air missile system designed to engage fighter jets, helicopters, and cruise missiles at ranges up to 50 kilometers and altitudes of 10 kilometers. Each Chu-SAM battery consists of 6 missile launch vehicles mounted on an 8x8 all-terrain chassis, supported by a multi-function active electronically scanned array radar capable of tracking 100 targets simultaneously and engaging 12 at once. The missiles themselves are single-stage, solid-fuel rockets weighing 580 kilograms, flying at Mach 2, 5 over 3,000 kilometers per hour, and guided by active radar homing seekers borrowed from Japan's Type 99 air-to-air missiles. Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi, during a November 2025 visit to Yonaguni, made clear the purpose. The deployment can reduce the possibility of an armed attack on Japan. Translation: Japan is betting that visible, capable air defenses will force Chinese planners to account for losses, complicating any blockade or strike scenario. But here's the kicker. The Type 3 system isn't cutting edge. Developed in the early 2000s to replace aging Hawk missiles, it's effective but not invincible. Its 50-kilometer range means it can't reach far into the Taiwan Strait or intercept ballistic missiles. What it can do is deny Chinese aircraft and cruise missiles easy access to the airspace directly above and around Yonaguni, forcing attackers to either suppress the site first or route around it, both of which buy time and complicate operational planning. Yonaguni is one node in a much larger network. Across the Ryukyu chain, Japan has activated 7 missile regiments since 2016, with the final unit, the 8th Surface-to-Ship Missile Regiment, completing deployment in Yufuin, Kyushu, in November 2025. The primary weapon is the Type 12 Surface-to-Ship Missile, a truck-launched anti-ship system originally designed to defend Japan's strategic straits against Chinese naval incursions. The original Type 12 had a range of 200 kilometers, sufficient to cover the waters between islands but limited in reach. Japan is now fielding an upgraded version with dramatically extended range, 900 kilometers initially, with plans to push that to 1,200 kilometers. Testing conducted in October and November 2024 on Nijima Island revealed a redesigned missile with extended wings, improved aerodynamic surfaces, and reduced radar cross-section for stealth. The upgraded Type 12 incorporates GPS guidance, inertial navigation, and an active electronically scanned array radar seeker for terminal homing, plus a new capability called Up-to-Date Command, allowing the missile to receive real-time targeting updates via satellite while in flight, enabling strikes on moving ships. This is more than coastal defense. Japan's government classifies the upgraded Type 12 as part of its counterstrike capability, the ability to hit enemy launch sites and command nodes in response to an armed attack. Under Article 9 of Japan's constitution, such strikes are permitted only when an attack threatens the nation's survival. No other means exist to repel it, and force used is the minimum necessary. In practice, this means Japan is developing the ability to strike Chinese air bases, naval facilities, and missile launchers across the East China Sea and potentially deep into mainland China if conflict erupts. 3 regiments, the 5th, 7th, and 8th, are now positioned across Kyushu and Okinawa, covering the approaches to the Taiwan Strait from the north and east. The 7th Regiment alone is dispersed across Okinawa Island, Miyakojima, Ishigaki, and Amami Oshima, each site equipped with Type 12 launchers. Together, these units can theoretically engage Chinese naval forces attempting to encircle Taiwan, though Japan has not publicly stated under what conditions it would actually fire. Missiles are useless without targeting data. Japan's real advantage isn't the hardware, it's the integration. The newly established Joint Operations Command, activated in March 2025, coordinates real-time targeting using satellite reconnaissance, airborne early warning aircraft, ground-based radars, and data shared from U.S. forces. The system, known as JADG, Japan Aerospace Defense Ground Environment, links every radar, missile battery, and command post into a unified network capable of tracking threats and assigning intercepts within seconds. On Yonaguni, the Type 3 Chu-Sam battery feeds into this network, allowing it to engage targets detected by radars hundreds of kilometers away, even if the missile's own radar hasn't acquired them yet. This sensor-to-shooter architecture is what makes Japan's missile wall credible. A Chinese aircraft approaching Taiwan from the northeast might be detected by an E-2D Hawkeye flying off Okinawa, tracked by a ground radar on Miyakojima, and engaged by a missile launched from Yonaguni, all without the battery on Yonaguni ever needing line of sight. The U.S. contribution amplifies this. In August 2024, American forces deployed advanced radar systems to Yonaguni as part of Marine Littoral Regiment operations. These units are designed to operate from dispersed island bases, providing targeting data not just to Japanese forces, but to U.S. Navy destroyers and Air Force strike aircraft operating in the region. The result is a layered defense. Patriot PAC-3 batteries on Okinawa handle high-altitude ballistic threats, Aegis destroyers engage medium-range targets at sea, and Type 3 systems on forward islands like Yonaguni contest low-altitude cruise missiles and aircraft trying to slip through gaps. But there's one problem nobody's talking about: logistics. Yonaguni is 500 kilometers from Okinawa and nearly 2,000 kilometers from mainland Japan. Resupplying missiles, fuel, and personnel under combat conditions, especially if Chinese forces target the island early, would be extraordinarily difficult. Japan has conducted joint refueling and logistics drills with U.S. forces on Yonaguni, but the question remains: can these bases sustain operations if they come under sustained missile or drone attack? China isn't sitting still. The November 24, 2025 drone incursion that triggered Japanese fighter scrambles was no accident, it was a statement. By flying surveillance drones through the Yonaguni-Taiwan corridor, China is demonstrating that it can monitor Japanese military movements in real time and probe response patterns without risking manned aircraft. The PLA is also deploying electronic warfare aircraft equipped with active electronically scanned array radars capable of tracking multiple targets and jamming enemy sensors. During a 30-minute radar lock-on incident involving a Chinese J-15 fighter and a Japanese aircraft in late 2025, the Chinese jet maintained targeting radar contact far longer than previous encounters, a tactic designed to test Japanese electronic countermeasures and psychological resilience. China's carrier operations are equally telling. The Liaoning's deployment east of the Ryukyu Islands in June 2025 marked the first time a Chinese carrier crossed the so-called second island chain, demonstrating Beijing's ability to operate beyond the East China Sea and into the Pacific. This matters because it means Chinese naval aviation can approach Taiwan and Japan's southwestern islands from multiple vectors, not just from the west. If conflict erupts, Japanese missile batteries on Yonaguni and neighboring islands would face saturation attacks from multiple directions: ballistic missiles from the mainland, cruise missiles from ships and submarines, and air-launched weapons from carrier-based fighters. Japan's deployments also carry political risk. Every missile battery installed near Taiwan reinforces Beijing's narrative that Tokyo is conspiring with Washington to prevent reunification. Chinese state media has explicitly framed Yonaguni's militarization as evidence of Japanese aggression and a violation of post-World War II constraints on Japanese military power. For Japan, this creates a dilemma. Deploying too few systems leaves gaps that invite Chinese probing. Deploying too many risks, provoking the very conflict the missiles are meant to deter. And if deterrence fails, Yonaguni, just 110 kilometers from Taiwan, becomes one of the first casualties. Can Japan's missile deployments 110 kilometers from Taiwan actually deter Chinese aggression? The answer is yes, but only as part of a larger alliance framework, and only if Japan is willing to accept the risks that come with forward defense. The Type 3 Chu-Sam batteries on Yonaguni, the Type 12 anti-ship missiles across the Ryukyu chain, and the integrated sensor networks linking them together don't make Japan invincible. What they do is raise the cost of Chinese military action, forcing Beijing to allocate resources to suppress Japanese defenses before moving on Taiwan resources that might otherwise overwhelm Taiwanese forces in the critical opening hours of a conflict. First, geography is destiny. Japan's southwestern islands sit directly astride the approaches to Taiwan, meaning Tokyo cannot remain neutral in a Taiwan crisis, even if it wanted to. Second, deterrence is fragile. Every missile deployment strengthens Japan's defensive posture, but also increases the likelihood that Chinese planners will designate those sites as first strike targets. Third, integration beats isolation. Japan's missile wall only works because it's networked with U.S. forces, Taiwanese sensors, and real-time satellite data takes away that cooperation, and the system's effectiveness drops dramatically. By 2028, Japan will have deployed air, sea, and underwater drones under the SHIELD system, adding autonomous surveillance to its southwestern defenses. The question now isn't whether Japan can build a missile wall. It already has. The question is whether that wall holds when tested, or whether the 110 kilometers separating Yonaguni from Taiwan becomes the flashpoint for the next great power conflict in the Pacific. And what happens next will determine whether deterrence survives or collapses. Support the channel by liking and sharing this video, and subscribe to stay informed about the next wave of technological innovation.